Welcome back to MetFlex and Chill. This is Rachel Geiger, your host, and I'm here today with Mike Matthews. What's up, Mike?
Oh, just another day closer to the Civil War, the media is saying. Yeah, I don't think
Oh boy, yeah, I know. It's crazy. I mean, we're in 2021 now, so hopefully things are
I don't I
shifting
don't I
in
don't
a
quite understand that logic
I
though.
know.
Things are only getting wilder. So what now because it's 2021, we can just assume that the universe is going to chill out? I don't know. I don't know. I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just what people are hoping, but who knows? I've been seeing so many different memes about that, like all over the place. It's really funny.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we have a lot to dive into today. So we can get started. I'm sure we could talk about the pandemic and all that for hours. But I do want to kind of dive into your area of expertise in terms of supplements, fitness, nutrition, all that jazz, and kind of ask a few questions. We have some listener questions, and then I have some personal questions. But before we do that, do you want to just give our listeners kind of a little background, tell us, your story, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. So without this is whenever I do this, I like end up talking for 10 minutes straight. I'm like, all right, well, that actually wasn't the long story short. So let's see if I can really just make a long story short. So I published a book back in 2012 called Bigger, Leaner, Stronger. And it was really just the book. I was kind of scratching my own itch. This is the book I wish somebody would have given me back when I was 17 or 18, getting into weightlifting, and said, hey, don't worry about like 80% of the things that you're going to learn about and try. Most of them you don't really need. And if you just do these things, like here are the 20% that actually just give you the 80%, and just focus on this, and you'll get to where you want to be a lot faster. And so in Bigger, Leaner, Stronger, it went over fundamentals of proper dieting, fundamentals of proper training, strength training in particular, and touched on supplementation and explained why supplements are completely optional. You don't actually need any supplements at all if you don't want to, but if you have the budget and inclination, there are some you should consider. Here's why. And that book I self-published because although I had some experience working with other people and had maybe some transformations I could share, I had a pretty good story myself in my own personal transformation, which really the summary of that is for the first 7 years or so of weightlifting, I didn't really know what I was doing, but fortunately, I knew that I didn't know what I was doing. It was something I just didn't take that seriously. It was something I liked to do. It was a social activity. Friends and I would go to the gym and we would do bodybuilder magazine workouts and work with trainers now and then who would just beat the shit out of us. And we didn't understand like why we were doing things, but we just did what we were told, right? And then around year 7 or 8, I figured, if this is a thing, and this is a thing I'm probably going to do for the rest of my life, so I might as well inform myself and actually learn how to get more out of the effort that I'm putting into it. And so I started to educate myself and learned that a lot of what I was doing was suboptimal, I guess you could say. Again, I was putting a fair amount of time into it and attention into it, but wasn't getting nearly as much out of it as I could have. So started changing my diet, or how I was going about dieting at the time. And by that, I just mean my eating regimen, not dieting necessarily in the sense of like trying to lose fat, but just how I was eating. And the again, at the time, I didn't really know that much. It was like, okay, I'm supposed to eat a lot of protein. I know that. And I guess, it's obvious that you're supposed to eat nutritious foods. And carbs at the time, this was before the low carb craze, so there wasn't that much to be said about carbs. That was really it. It was like, oh, I'm supposed to eat 400 grams of protein per day. Like that's what these big bodybuilders said. And I'm supposed to just make sure I eat some vegetables and fruits and whole grains, and beyond that I didn't really know, right? And then started to learn a bit about proper training principles, strength training principles, the importance of stuff like progressive overload and volume and frequency and blah blah blah. And so I changed a lot of what I was doing, and then got pretty lean for the first time. So got down to maybe I would call it 8% body fat or so, where you have abs and you kind of look like maybe a cover model ish type of physique, and gained a lot of strength and started gaining muscle again. And so a friend of mine at the time was like, hey, you should just take your shirt off and go on YouTube and sell things. And literally what he said. I remember it vividly. And it stuck out to me because it's so not me. And I was so not interested in that. But what I was interested in was writing a book because it was kind of in line with some of the work I was doing in my previous life, building employee training programs for companies, how to stuff, breaking down um, a lot of information into kind of bite-sized chunks that a person can go through and then do a job. And I've always enjoyed reading and studying and learning, so it's also just been an interest of mine. And so that I was like, I'll do that. I'll write a book, and it's going to be a minimum viable product kind of approach, right? I'm not going to spend 5 years writing this book. I'm just going to put together something 50, 60, maybe 70,000 words and put my basic kind of here's what I've done. Here's what has worked, and here's the research to back it up. And I didn't claim to make any breakthroughs myself, or I didn't discover anything. I'm just kind of compiling information, backing it up with research, and just saying, hey, try this and it'll work. It will, because this is how the body works, period. This is whether you're a man or a woman, even though the book Bigger, Leaner, Stronger was geared toward men, a lot of women were reading it and asking me, hey, can I do this? I don't want to be bigger, but leaner and stronger for sure. Maybe can we switch out thinner or maybe fitter for bigger? That I want, right? And that's actually why I ended up writing a book for women. But so that book, Bigger, Leaner, Stronger, I published in 2012, and I didn't have any expectations really. I thought there was like a 50-50 chance it was going to sell 0 copies and not 0 copies, but didn't have much of a I really had no plan beyond that. I was just curious. It was just really for fun. And so by the end of 2012, it was selling several thousand copies per month. And I was getting a lot of good feedback and people who were now doing the program that came with the book and seeing results, questions, suggestions, and so forth. And so I've done now several new editions of the book, and in almost, so I've done like, I'm on the 3rd edition, and I'm actually starting what will probably be a 4th edition, because the information I'm very happy with now in the 3rd edition. It's just now that I've gone through this other book project that I'm wrapping up. It's going to be my first traditionally published book with Simon and Schuster. I feel like there are now things that I can do to the book, to my existing books, to better organize the information is the biggest thing. And anyways, I just going through this latest book project, I was surprised at how many ideas I had. Like, oh, that's pretty good. And I actually have to give credit to the editor that I'm working with at Simon and Schuster. She's been really good. And so a lot of these are her ideas on how to better explain things or how to better organize information. And so I'm going to be starting that. I've actually already started that process, and it's not going to, I probably won't release it as an official 4th edition. I'm just going to take the 3rd edition and update things and just do it that way. But so from there, I wrote more books. I wrote a book for women, did a cookbook, launched a website called Muscle for Life, which was really just a blog. And that grew very quickly because it was good timing, probably was the biggest reason. And it was a bit unique in that there weren't that many sources at the time of good long form, decently written, well-sourced information. And now you have a lot more of that, but Muscle for Life was maybe I wouldn't say it was that wasn't like the pioneering website. There were other people doing it, and those are people whose work I followed. But it was definitely in the kind of early adoption phase, whereas now it's kind of more just the early majority, or even just the late majority. And so that then grew quickly, and I saw an opportunity to scratch my itch again with supplementation and kind of just make the supplements that I wished somebody else were making, and that's Legion. And, I've done an app, and I've kind of just added things. I'm always just adding the next thing, basically. And things get done. I'm kind of impatient, so I feel like everything takes too long, but it's coming along.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I followed your work for a while, and I always, I've read your blogs and just
Cool.
the information you put out, and your books too. We were talking off air. I have one of your latest books, Fitness Science Explained, which I'm going to ask about towards the end, because I want to chat a little bit about research.
Sure.
But yeah, amazing information. I soak it all up. I'm kind of like you. I love just learning and reading and just nerding out on all things fitness and nutrition. So yeah, but before we, so actually, let's just jump right in. I do have a few listener questions, like I mentioned, but I do want to ask kind of just to kind of get your ideas in terms of, in general, like I said, I've read a lot of your blogs, and you dive into so many relevant topics that some of them I'm just like, wow, this makes so much sense. Like I didn't even think about this. And I know there's a lot of people listening that are obviously interested in nutrition and training and, building their best body composition and all of that. So in terms of like the nutrition side of things, what would you say would be like the top kind of three mistakes that you see when it comes to someone who might be diving into a diet or a fat loss phase? Kind of like the top three things that you would say, maybe don't go that route, but let's focus on these things instead.
Yeah. Um, so top three, I would say the first one probably I just have to start with the simplest, which would be related to energy balance and calorie intake, and not understanding that it's a calorie deficit that drives fat loss, or an energy deficit, consistently eating fewer calories than you burn, or understanding that and accepting that reality, that hard truth. There's no way around it,
Mhm.
but not understanding how to actually put that into practice and get results with that knowledge. Like, for example, a common mistake that people make with meal planning, I guess you could say, is maybe they do a good job taking their calories and breaking them down into macronutrients, which I'll get to in a second, and turning that into some meals with foods they like, and it all makes sense on paper, but then not being able to execute, either because of just lack of consistency and not realizing that it is just a numbers game. Unfortunately, it's just math. Your body doesn't care that you overate because you felt bad that day. Like, it's okay if you did that. You just have to understand, though, that there's just a cause and effect relationship here that you can't escape, right? And so sometimes it's a consistency thing that people are aware of, and they just have to address what is causing them to be inconsistent with their diet. Now, we don't have to be perfect, of course. We just have to do it well enough. Like, again, the 80-20 Pareto principle rule is just always a good thing to think with in terms of fitness. I mean, it applies to many things, of course, but in fitness, if we're looking at our consistency or our compliance through that lens or prism, if you will, then all right. So if we're just within, let's say, 5% or so, if you're cutting, is probably a good target. 10% is a little bit too loosey goosey for me, but let's say we're within about 5% of our target calories, 80% of the time, essentially. Like maybe 4 or 5 out of the 7 days of the week, we're pretty much where we need to be with our calories. On the other days, they're not disasters. Let's just say that we're not overeating by so much that we're wiping out our progress on the other days. Maybe we're just, instead of hitting our 300 calorie deficit, or maybe our 500 calorie deficit for the day, it's a 100 calorie deficit, or maybe it's not, maybe it's even a slight surplus. Okay, big deal, but that's totally fine. Like, if somebody can do that, they can do well. However, there are also mistakes that people make that ruin compliance, but they don't realize it. And this is something that, a lesson that I learned firsthand. So, for example, you have your meal plan. Let's say it has a, for me, it might have a cup of dry oatmeal. For a woman, maybe not. It's kind of a lot of calories from oatmeal in one meal. She might want to go with a half a cup, but it has that's in the meal plan. And okay, so you measure the cup, or the half a cup, and you're eyeballing it, and you eat it, and you think that, okay, I was quote unquote good. I followed my plan. I ate my cup or half a cup of oatmeal. But what you may not realize is that when you look at the nutrition facts panel of the oatmeal, or whatever you're looking at online to see what the calories are, it's assuming in grams a certain weight of oatmeal, and it's going to be pretty specific. Let's say it's like 80 grams or so. That's the cup that is in your meal plan, essentially. But if you're not weighing, you might accidentally just put in 100 grams of oatmeal. Well, that's a 25% increase in the calories of that meal. And then let's say, later in the day, your meal plan calls for some high protein yogurt and maybe some nut butter. And maybe for the nut butter, let's say it's a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons. And okay, so you do your 2 tablespoons, but they're kind of heaping tablespoons. And again, when you look at it in terms of weight, and that's really what if we're talking about precision in terms of calorie tracking, we have to go by weight, not just eyeballing amounts of food, right? So maybe the weight of that tablespoon in your meal plan, you may not realize it, but it might be assuming 25 grams or something like that. And what you put in there is 35 grams or 40 grams. And so if you make those mistakes just a few times per day, and especially this can be particularly punishing to women, and especially smaller women who are wanting to go from maybe a little bit overweight or maybe even just normal body composition to lean, let's say, and who don't have that many calories to play with, maybe who are striving to eat 1,500 to 1,700 calories, maybe 1,800 calories per day, and trying to maintain maybe a 300 calorie deficit, you can wipe that out just in the way I just mentioned. And it just takes a few mistakes. And what sucks about that is it can be very confusing because you feel like I'm following the plan. I'm eating, I'm measuring all of my food and nothing's happening. And that can then send people into all kinds of wacky quackery as to what's going on, metabolic voodoo bullshit of hormones and is particularly insulin. And then they can go, oh, I need to do a keto diet, or I need a carnivore diet, or I need to start taking these weird supplements. And so I'd say that just coming back to your original question, that's the biggest mistake is just related to calorie intake and not realizing how many calories that you're eating. Or on the flip side, we have the calorie expenditure as well, overestimating calorie expenditure, for example, and not knowing how to come to a reasonably accurate estimate. Of course, again, we're not looking to be perfect. We couldn't in terms of energy expenditure. It's a moving target anyway. It changes a little bit every day, but we were just trying to be close enough and work within acceptable margins of error, basically. So that's a big one. Next on the list is, I mentioned macronutrients, which these are the nutrients that our body needs in large amounts to stay alive. So we have protein, we have carbohydrate, we have dietary fat. It actually does include some minerals as well, but as far as body composition goes, we're just talking about protein, carbs, and fat. And out of the three of those, protein is the most important. And so another common mistake, and this is I would say it's not just with cutting, it's also with maintaining, it's also with lean gaining, but the effects are most negative when cutting, and that is just not eating enough protein. And I see that a lot with women as well, and that's probably because, in my experience working with many women, especially if they're new to all this fitness stuff, it's rare for me to find a woman who naturally eats a high protein diet because I'm actually not even sure why. Now I think about it, it just seems like men are more inclined to eat a lot of meat, for example, than a lot of women that I've worked with and spoken with over the years. And I would say that if I put a number to it, probably something around 50 grams of protein per day. It seems like maybe a reasonable average of protein intake for a lot of women who are coming into this. And what would be ideal is at least double that for most women. And to put a number to it, something around 1 gram per pound of body weight per day of protein is reasonable. It can be a bit less. It could be maybe 0.8 grams per pound per day. And if a woman is, and this is, if a woman's fairly muscular, quote unquote, compared to the average woman. So if this is a woman who has been doing a lot of resistance training and who is pretty lean, let's say she's around 20-ish% body fat and she wants to get really lean, she wants to get beneath 20, then a bit more than 1 gram per pound of body weight per day is reasonable and supported by research. But of course there aren't that many women out there who are in that bucket. Most women are, again, they just want to get to probably that area of around 20% body fat, which is where women look athletic, but they look feminine. They still have curves. They have muscle definition, but not like mass, not vascularity like men. You know what I mean? There's a point where I understand many women think it looks a bit extreme, and that's probably around 15 to 16% body fat. And so coming back to it, then protein intake is super important for women and for men who have a lot of weight to lose. That 1 gram per pound of body weight per day is not negative per se, but it's not necessary, and it can be a bit obnoxious. Like for let's take a 200-pound woman who wants to get to 150 pounds, let's say, or 140 pounds, whatever. That's kind of like that's the look she's going for. She doesn't need to start with 200 grams of protein per day. And that's a fair amount of protein for even someone like me to eat. So I understand, and I've heard from many women over the years who are like, do I really have to try to do that? Because again, going from like 50 grams a day to literally 4xing it is daunting. So in that case, anybody listening who has a fair amount of weight to lose, so let's just put some numbers to it. If you're a woman, maybe over 25% body fat, or over, let's say 30+%, something around there. If you're a guy at 20+% body fat, then you can actually just go with 40% of your daily calories from protein. That's an easier way of getting there. And you calculate that by just understanding that 1 gram of protein has about 4 calories. So if you are going to eat 2,000 calories per day, then this would be like a guy, right? A standard kind of 180, 190 pound male cutting diet is probably going to be around 2,000, depending on how active he is, 2,000, 2,200. But for simple math, let's say 2,000. All right, cool. You get 800 calories from protein, which is 200 grams. So that math works out fine in terms of the 1 gram per pound, obviously. But if that guy is 250 pounds, then he doesn't have to eat 250 grams of protein. And again, if even that is a bit much, I'd say it's probably fine to go down to even 30% of calories. So something in the range 30 to 40% from protein. And yep, so I think that covers that mistake. Oh, one other thing to actually talk about that is this consistency and compliance point. Again, it's important to hit that target within maybe let's say 5 to 10% or so. So if you were supposed to eat 150 grams of protein and you got to 130 or 140, that's fine. We're going to give that the green light. If it was 100, not terrible, but it would be better if it was a bit higher. So what I've seen, and I've seen this actually more with men than women, but what I've seen is where protein intake will be optimal in the range that we want several days a week, and then a lot less several days a week. And unfortunately, that can cause issues. And in the case of cutting, it can increase hunger and increase cravings. It can increase or accelerate muscle loss. It can slow down fat loss. On the flip side, then you're hearing some of the benefits of a higher protein intake or a higher protein diet. But again, you need to be consistent with that high protein intake. It doesn't have to be 7 days a week. If you can do it 7 days a week, that's great. But I would say if we can get you to 5 days a week, then we're mostly there. Again, we've gotten kind of the 80%. And if we want to get to 100, then and it works to be within the optimal range 7 days a week, then do it. But again, what I've seen more with men than women is good enough compliance throughout the week, and then and their protein intake just falls off a cliff on the weekend. Like going from, let's say the guy is supposed to be eating 180 grams. That's his target. Pretty good Monday through Friday, but then eating like 40 per day on Saturday and Sunday. Not optimal, even though those 5 days were good. It's just the other 2 days are so low. And it really depends where the guy's at in terms of if he's brand new to all this, he won't notice that actually would be fine in terms of results, but that can be a problem. And especially if it's more days per week. So if it's like, all right, in the range, let's say 3 days per week, and then 2 days per week out of range, let's take this 150 grams. So 3 days around 150, 2 days are more like 80 to 100. Okay. That's kind of a yellow. And then 2 days are, sub 80. Well, that'd be a red. And that can cause issues. So again, if we can go for at least 5 days of optimal, and then if we're going to be a little bit loosey goosey, let's try not to uh, eat way too little protein on these other 2 days. It'd be similar to the calorie thing, where you can be spot on 5 days a week and then blow yourself up on the weekend and completely wipe out your progress. Whereas if you are good during the week and then maybe you eat a bit more, and it's okay to even think like that. I mean, I tell people, if you it's kind of up to you. So if you are quote unquote, if you're on target through the week, and then you can play your weekends kind of by ear. Do you feel like you would like to eat a bit more food? Okay, then eat a bit more food, and maybe even come up to maintenance calories over the weekend. So that might give you an extra 3, 4, 500 calories per day. Enjoy yourself, and then kind of get back to it during the week. And if you come into the weekend and you don't feel the need to eat any more food, and I do this myself when I'm cutting, I'll kind of commit to the week, and then on the weekend, I see how my body feels. Essentially, do I want to eat a
Mhm.
bit more food, or do I have an occasion to eat a bit more food? Okay. Do I not? Okay, then I'm just going to stick to my diet. So there's that, and then I think the third and final mistake, if we're just sticking to nutrition, I would say then we have to talk about the quality, like the food choices, and not because what you eat directly impacts fat burning, other than maybe you could say protein, because research does show that a higher protein diet does directly result in more fat loss. And there are some reasons for that. We don't have to get into it. But as far as which protein, like oh, tilapia versus ground beef versus chicken, that doesn't matter. That's really where it's what is the protein content of this food? What is the calorie content of this food? How does that work into our plan? Done. However, there is something to be said for the importance of getting the majority. I'll come back to the 80-20. So about, let's say something about 80% of your daily calories from relatively unprocessed and nutritious foods. So that's going to be mostly stuff that you are buying in individual pieces and cooking and assembling yourself, as opposed to prepackaged stuff. And to be specific, so lean protein sources, there are quite a few. And the reason why I say lean is not that you can't eat fatty protein when you're dieting. It's just most people tend to do better with leaner sources, which allows them to quote unquote use the calories that would be in the fat for other foods, because a lean source of protein is going to be more or less equally filling as a fattier source. So you're not really going to gain anything there by adding fat. And if you're willing to do a little bit of work with it, I think you can make lean protein taste, you can make the experience of eating it more or less on par with fattier sources. But some people, if they really like their 80-20 ground beef and they really over the 93-7, which I kind of understand, honestly, then that's fine. Or if they really like the chicken thighs over the chicken breast, that's okay. That can work too. Or if they really like the full 5% skyr or Greek yogurt versus the 0%, which I understand as well, you can make these things work. But
Mhm.
generally speaking, or the full eggs versus the egg whites, generally speaking, though, if you can, when you're cutting specifically, stick to the leanest source of protein as you can stomach, it's going to allow you some more flexibility with your carbs and fats, which you can play around with and kind of set up however you want. The protein is I think it's good to stick to the guidelines that I shared. Carbs and fats, do whatever you want, make them work. But back to this point of the quality of the food, a couple of reasons why it's important to eat plenty of nutritious foods, particularly when you're cutting. One is really what that means is you're going to be eating whole grains. So you're going to be eating, I mean, my go-to is oatmeal, but of course you have other options. You have rice, white or brown. Many people, of course, do that. You have quinoa, you have barley. You could argue that even multigrain, whole grain bread could qualify. I mean, in the literature, it would. So I could throw that in there. It's not, wouldn't be something I would prefer to eat oatmeal over whole grain bread, but just depends on the meal plan. And then we have fruits, we have vegetables, of course, and eating ideally probably 1 to 2 servings of fruit per day and 4 to 6 servings of vegetables per day. Can go higher if you'd like, but that's just a good baseline to shoot for. And so, if you're going to implement what I just described, if you start meal planning that out, what you're going to find is like those calories start to add up, and you are going to be getting a lot of your calories from these nutritious foods. And that's going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to help keep you full. Like vegetables, that's one of the reasons why they're great for cutting. They don't cause fat loss. No foods cause fat loss, but certain foods are more conducive to losing fat than others. And the main thing is because of how full they make you feel on how little calories they contain. And vegetables are the king of that. Some vegetables are more calorie dense than others, of course, but if you start looking around at the calories of many different vegetables, and then you cook it up and you eat it, you will quickly see like, hey, I'm pretty full on 150 calories of these vegetables, whereas 150 calories of cheese is like an ounce and a half or something. It's nothing. You don't even feel like you ate. And then there's the point of, and the same thing goes for whole grains like oatmeal, very filling, and other types of grains, very filling. Seeds and nuts also, I'd throw that in as well. They are calorie dense, but they also are filling, and there's maybe a little bit of something to be said for the energy that's required to process them. So they're not as high calorie as they appear. I'm referring to what's called the thermic effect of food, which is the amount of energy required to digest and absorb. That said, I wouldn't. That is not significant enough to like cut the calories in half, the quote unquote effective calories. But it is just something that's kind of neat with nuts and seeds, which also incidentally are a great source of healthy fats as well. And so you have the satiety effect, the fact that the more of those types of foods that you put into your meal plan, especially when you're cutting, the fuller you are generally going to be. And that works wonders for compliance because being hungry sucks and dealing with cravings sucks. And even if you are a very disciplined and kind of like tough-willed kind of person, and let's say you stick it out, and yeah, you quote unquote slip up here and there, but for the most part you just kind of stick to your plan. uh, you just have to suffer through it. Why make it harder than it needs to be? So that's how I look at it with my own dieting. I mean, I tend to eat like that anyway, but I'm always I don't see any need to make things harder or more complicated than they need to be or should be. And then there's also something to be said for the importance of maintaining enough of the key nutrients that your body needs to not only feel good but also to perform well. And there's some research that indicates that our nutritional status can actually directly impact metabolism. For example, I've written about and spoken about a study that was done. It was a case study, so it's obviously a small sample size. I believe there are two women involved, but it is interesting nonetheless. And so in this case, you had women who I'll skip the details and just get to the point. They were not getting enough zinc is what was happening, and by increasing their zinc intake to where it should be, their metabolisms increased by a lot. It was about 200 to 300 calories per day in one case, and it was, I believe, around 500 calories per day in the other case. I mean, that's wild.
Mm-hmm.
That's cardio. I mean, think of how many calories do you burn doing 30 minutes of moderate intensity biking, maybe 300 or 400, and those women got that through just correcting an imbalance in their nutrition. And you can develop nutritional insufficiencies even eating a fairly decent diet depending on the foods that you're eating. And if you're not taking a multivitamin supplement, for example, just to try to plug any holes that might be there, you can feel like you're eating well. And I guess you could say like, yeah, you eat well. You do get in fruits, you get in vegetables, you are paying attention to what you're eating and your food choices. But unfortunately, the foods that you're eating don't contain, like when you just look at your diet and you just mash all that food up and you look at the nutrition of it, oh, it's not providing enough zinc, for example, or it's not providing enough maybe iron in the case of women. That can be kind of common. It's not providing enough vitamin K. It's not providing enough vitamin D because you're not eating very many processed foods that have been fortified and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can help. avoid running into problems related to nutritional insufficiencies by just eating a lot of nutritious foods.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you touched on a lot of really good points, and a few questions came up just actually based off of mentioning the multivitamin. That kind of triggered another question that I had, and one of the listeners had about supplements. So someone asked, like, if you had to pick your top five supplement recommendations, like individual supplements, what would you choose? And then also, I just want to ask, maybe we can tackle this first. Just you mentioned multivitamins and kind of, what is the actual effective dose of a multivitamin? Because, most of the ones that you find in your average CVS, it's like, okay, there's a list of 20 ingredients on the back and it says, take one or two pills. It's probably
Yeah.
not,
And
probably not effective.
yeah, like super compressed tablets too, where you're like, am I just pooping these things out like
Yeah.
intact, or can my body actually even process this? But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's a good question. So on the multivitamin point, one, I would say just to make it clear that it's not necessary to take a multivitamin, but I actually do think it's smart, and I think it's smart regardless of how well you eat. I take one. I take my own, of course, but I take one, and I would say I eat as well as I possibly can without being full blown neurotic about it, basically. So like I follow all the basic recommendations I just shared, but I go a bit further and even eat specific fruits and vegetables because they contain neat things that you're not going to find in other fruits and vegetables. Like I eat blueberries for the pigment, which contains anthocyanins, which have anti-cancer effects. They're just basically a great antioxidant. On the vegetable side of things, I make sure to eat cruciferous vegetables every day for the compounds that they have that can help balance hormones. And again, these are not to say that it's like a testosterone booster like some people claim, but no, it's just has a slight effect that, in addition to all the other things that I do that have slight positive effects on hormone profile. I don't get blood work done because I don't do steroids. That's usually why people get blood work done, by the way. These big muscular guys, yeah, that's why. So I can't say for sure how well all my strategies are working, but at least I don't have any symptoms of low testosterone. I don't think it's a problem, right? And so despite that, I take a multivitamin again because, and I kind of mentioned this, just to plug any holes. Like vitamin K is a good example. It is actually hard to get vitamin K. I don't eat seaweed. I have it every once in a while if I go to a sushi place. Otherwise, I'm not eating seaweed. Vitamin D, I don't. I mean, I live in Virginia. I spend time in Florida as well. Although actually now I guess I flipped that around. So I'm going to be spending more time in Florida and less time in Virginia. Whatever. I'm used to saying I guess I live in Florida now. But I split my time between Virginia and Florida. That said, I still am not in the sun enough to maintain sufficiency in vitamin D, because that would require research would show that you could say, like, if you exposed most of your skin, let's say 70 or 80% of your skin, and you were able to go out in the sun for probably, depending on where you're at, but if it were the Florida sun, maybe 15 to 20 minutes a day, maybe 15 minutes a day with 70% of your skin exposed would do a pretty good job. Now, you're not going to get the additional benefits that you can get by increasing your vitamin D levels higher than that, but you could probably maintain at least high enough D3 production for basic health. But who does that, right? And then
Mhm.
and there's winter. Like right now, I'm in Virginia, and yeah, there's no sun tanning for months, right?
Mhm.
And even in Florida, it's cold. Like you're not going to be tanning, and so vitamin D is something that is good to supplement with, and there are others as well. And then there's something to be said for, I'm just talking about vitamins and minerals, but a good multivitamin, I think, should have more than just that, because, well, one, there's cost. It's very inexpensive to make just an essential vitamin mineral supplement, even if you add some of these vitamins and minerals that you don't find in other supplements, sometimes because of cost, sometimes because of negligence. And then there are certain forms of vitamins and minerals that are a bit more expensive but are better absorbed by the body and just do better. So even if you have a well formulated essential vitamin mineral supplement, that's fine, but it's still not very expensive. I mean, I think that a good multivitamin should have more than just that. And that would include things that are harder to get in your diet or impossible to get in your diet that can confer additional health benefits. And so, as far as effective dosing goes, a one a day is the least effective, period. Like, I don't care what company it is, how slick their marketing is, what they claim is in the product. You can only do so much with one pill a day. And even again, if it's a super compressed tablet that your body actually can process, you can only do so much with one pill a day. Take mine, just for contrast, mine is 8 a day. And I've gotten a lot of pushback on that over the
Mhm.
years. Many people are cool with it because they understand and they like what's in the product. They understand that the only way to get this down is to take stuff out. And I personally don't want to do that. I mean, if I guess that were the overwhelming consensus of my customers, then I would do it. If you know, if I just was getting like 90% complaints about it, and only a small sliver of people actually appreciated what's in the product, and if most people were saying, yeah, yeah, cool story, make it 4 pills a day, do what you need to do, or I'm not buying it, then I guess the market would force me to do that if I wanted to sell more of that product, right? But that's not the case. Many people, they don't like the fact that it's 8, but they like why it's 8, and so they just do it and they get used to it, right? So many people split it up 4 in the morning or at lunch. It's best taken with food. That's generally the case with multivitamins, just to help with absorption, with dietary fat in particular. It's good with a meal with fat, and then at dinner, and so that's the effective dose in the case of my multivitamin, which is, I mean, I'm biased, of course, but I would say, if somebody, and this is not even a challenge. I'm actually genuinely curious. If somebody, if you go to legionathletics.com, you check out Triumph is the name of the product, and you look what's in it. If you know of a better formulation and you can explain to me why it's better, I actually would love to see it, because maybe there's something that I and my team can learn, or that might give us some ideas on how we can improve Triumph. But there a lot of work has gone into formulating that, and I think it's really best in class. It just requires 8 pills a day to get all of that
Mhm.
stuff in there, and so I would say that a 2 a day is probably on the low end of what I would feel is acceptable. Again, a 1 a day I would personally never take. I would never recommend. I would never make it, even though I get asked to make a 1 a day just because, oh, it'd be easy. I don't believe in it. I just don't think it's worth making, period. A 2 a day would be, again, I would say the lowest end of what I feel would be an effective dose for a multivitamin. And then you go up from there, and it theoretically gets more effective. Now, the reason I say theoretically is it really depends on the formulation, right? You could have a horrible formulation that requires 30 pills a day, and that
Mhm.
doesn't mean, just the pills alone don't tell you that it's an effective product, but they are, I would say, something in the range of 2 to 8, I guess, is as the pills go up, I would say it's a good sign, but it doesn't mean it's a good product. It just indicates that there's more stuff in it, and you're going to want to know what that stuff is. And so that's the multivitamin
Yeah,
one. I don't
for
if you wanted
sure.
to follow up anything on that, but
No, yeah, no, I like that you explained that, because it is like some people look at, a pill bomb, they're like, whoa, six, like
yeah,
6 of these or 8 of these, like that's a lot. And I know, like, just from clients that I've worked with, they tend to be very surprised by that. But there's a reason for it. So yeah, I like that you kind of cleared that up. And then you did mention some of the other, supplement, like important
yep,
supplements, vitamin D, vitamin K.
yep.
Are there any others that you would recommend,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of
So
like
so
your
I'd
top
say,
list?
yeah, the top 5, I would say probably number 1 is a protein powder, not because you need a protein powder, but it's very convenient.
Mhm.
And especially for people who are busy on the go, who don't want to try to figure out how to eat 150 plus grams of protein per day from just food. And I'm even one of those people, more just because it's so convenient. Like, I have, let's see, so I have a scoop of whey protein after I work out. So I lift weights in the morning. I've moved things around. I just recently went back to the early morning slot because my gym got super busy at the 12 p.m. slot, and so I'd prefer it when there's not like 50 people in the gym and I'm waiting for equipment and so forth. And then I have just a scoop of whey after I work out, And then I have food protein, like usually some sort of meat at lunch in a salad, like chicken, or sometimes I do beef or just whatever. And sometimes it's turkey. It just depends what I'm in the mood for, I guess. And then I do 2 scoops of protein in the afternoon. So I like having around 3 p.m. I like to eat every few hours. Not that you have to do that. I just like it. I don't like intermittent fasting, for example. I don't like eating 2 or 3 large meals per day. I prefer to eat several smaller meals and then a larger dinner. And then, yeah, that's really it. Actually, is that's just how I like to eat. Anyway, so I have a scoop of whey, and I mix it with a scoop of a plant-based protein that I have called Plant Plus, which is a mixture of rice and pea protein. And I just like the combination together. And because I'm weird, I don't just drink it. So I put like probably 4 ounces of water, I would say about, and then I mix it up, and it kind of makes like a frosting type of consistency, and I eat it with a spoon. And so that's my afternoon snack, and then I eat some sort of meat again, usually at dinner, and that's it. And that altogether, I'm in the range of 180 to 200 grams of protein per day is how I do it. And so, if I got rid of the protein, could I make it work? Yeah, sure. I could eat some. I'd probably go for a high protein yogurt in the morning, I guess, instead of the scoop of whey. And then in the afternoon, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. I could eat more yogurt, I guess, or eat some meat, or maybe some eggs, or I just would rather drink protein. And a lot of people are the same way. And if you have a product you like, it can be nice to drink. I mean, I like my stuff even with water, but if you mix it with milk or a milk substitute, it can be really good. And so there also is a little bit of an experience there, to especially when you have different flavors to choose from. Like one of our new whey flavors is fruity cereal that people are really liking,
Mm.
and it kind of tastes like the milk left over after the what were those
Fruity
tricks?
Pebbles
Yeah, fruity
or trick.
pebbles or
Yeah.
tricks, right? Like right, so that kind of like sweet but also tart. Um, and how else are you gonna put that taste in your mouth? You're gonna eat fruity pebbles. I mean, you can if you
No.
want, but most people who are into health and fitness aren't gonna do that every day necessarily, right? And so that I'd say that's probably number one. And then number two would be a multivitamin, a well formulated multivitamin that contains vitamin D in particular. That's not necessary. Then you don't have to take it vitamin D on top of that necessarily. If you really want to know how much vitamin D you need, you'd need to get a blood test done to see where your D3 levels are at. And if they're good, then what you're doing is good. If they're a bit low, then you'd have to up your intake. Like my multivitamin contains 2,000 IUs per day, for example, of vitamin D, and that is research shows that's going to be sufficient. That's going to be good for most people. However, some people may need to take 5,000 a day really to optimize their vitamin D levels. And I personally haven't gotten the blood work done. I don't think it's necessary. Some people do. They just like that kind of thing. They know that 2,000 IUs is certainly going to prevent any sort of insufficiency. You're not going to run into any problems related to vitamin D if you're taking that much. If you like really getting into the details with your body, then maybe you'll find out you could take more. Not entirely necessary though. So multivitamin B number two, I would say an omega-3 supplement like a fish oil. If you do that, and maybe if you don't, then you need to go with something plant-based. Flaxseed oil is popular. There are some algae-based options, and the reason for that is that omega-3 fatty acid, which is a designation that just refers to the structure of it, is very important for many different aspects of health and even performance, and even body composition, actually. But many people do not get enough in their diet because the best source that we're going to eat regularly would be fatty fish. And many people, myself included, don't eat much fatty fish. And I don't because I don't particularly like it, and I'd rather just supplement with fish oil, really. But again, if I wanted to make it work without the supplement, I could. It would just require changing my meal plan in a way that would make it a bit less enjoyable to me. And there's no other benefit. There's no downside to taking a fish oil. It's not that eating fish is going to provide any other additional benefits. Really, it's going to give me some protein, and it's going to give me some omega-3s and a few other nutrients that I can get elsewhere. So that would be number three. And then after that, we could probably move to body composition, and at this point say creatine. because it works. It helps people gain muscle faster. It helps people get stronger faster. It helps people recover faster from their workouts. It helps people retain more muscle when they cut. It's completely safe. It's the most researched molecule in all of sports nutrition. There's no question that it works in most people. I mean, it is a natural supplement. So some people don't respond to it at all, but in most people, it is going to make a difference, and it's not going to hurt your kidneys. And I mean, if you have serious kidney issues, then I would say talk to your doctor first. But if you're just a normal, healthy person, you don't need to talk to your doctor about supplementing with creatine. And that's not me saying that again. That's a huge body of evidence that says that. And then beyond that, maybe again, body composition. If we were to add one more for people who are into fitness, probably citrulline would be my choice there. It helps you work a bit harder in your training, and there is evidence that it may help you gain more muscle just directly, in similar to how creatine helps you just directly gain more muscle, not in terms of mechanism, but just that it appears that it's not just a matter of, oh, well, the citrulline is helping you push a bit harder in your training, which then of course turns into more muscle gain over time. It does do that, but it also appears to have a bit of an additive effect on top of that. And beta alanine is similar in that regard. So if we wanted to throw those together, maybe those are number 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a solid list for sure. So you did mention, I did want to ask a question about training. We are coming up on an hour, so maybe this will be like a very compressed answer.
Yeah.
But we talked about like the top 3 mistakes that a lot of people make with nutrition, in terms of training, specifically lifting weights, resistance training, or just in general, lifting weights versus cardio. Do you have any like top 3 mistakes that you see, for like the general population? And maybe, obviously we're short on time, so however you want to tackle this
No,
question.
I don't have any hard stops, so I'm
Okay,
happy to give you the full answer.
cool.
So I'd say maybe this one is specifically for women, and that would be doing too much cardio and doing too little strength training in particular. And by that, I mean working to get stronger, which requires lifting heavier weights. And that means it's going to be lower rep ranges than many women are used to working in. Instead of maybe the 20 to 30 plus kind of sets, you're doing now probably nothing more than 10 to 12 or so reps per set. And as you get stronger and more acclimated to that style of training, you are going to probably end up doing some maybe even 4 to 6 rep stuff, things, the type of training that many women associate with guys. Like, oh yeah, that's how guys train to get like bigger biceps and stuff. And what many women don't realize is that style of training doesn't lead to bulkiness. I mean, guys, we have to work a lot. We have to work very hard to get quote unquote bulky ourselves. And we have some major physiological advantages that allows us to get much bigger, much faster. And so really what happens with women is when they focus on strength training, what they find is so long as they understand the relationship between the muscle that they gain and their body fat level and what they see in the mirror. And really a long story short there is, the more muscle a woman gains, the lower her body fat level has to be to look smaller and to look more fit, to have more muscle definition. That's really all it is. So I've worked again with thousands and thousands of women over the years, and these are just normal everyday women who have lives to live. They care about their fitness, but in their physique, but it's not their obsession. And they have a few hours a week to get in the gym, and they're willing to pay attention to the dietary things that I've talked about, but they also want to live their life. They're not getting paid for this kind of thing. For most women, I would say that the look that they're after requires probably about 15 pounds of muscle gained in the right places on their body and a body fat level of somewhere around 20%. And some women have, if they want to look even more athletic, maybe it's 18%. If they want to have a bit more curves, because like as you get leaner, generally your boobs are going to get a little bit smaller, and you're going to see differences. Your butt's going to look a little bit different. Now we're talking about just subjective. How does she want to look? So maybe it's 22% for some women, maybe it's 18% for others. So to gain that 15 pounds of muscle, and in some cases it's a bit more. Some women want to gain 20 pounds of muscle, and these are not women who want to look like bodybuilders at all. It really just kind of depends on, like, for example, taller women generally need to gain more muscle to have the same look than shorter women. That's just a matter of size of body and skeleton that we need to add muscle to, right? But let's just call it 20 pounds on average. Let's just say that that requires quite a bit of hard work. I mean, that for your average woman, I would say she could probably do that in 2 to 3 years of consistent hard training, like strength
Mm-hmm.
training, like I'm talking about. And whereas your average guy could do that in his first year, for example. And so how that looks then is, let's say, again, the average person has 3 to 5 hours a week probably to give to this, and most of that time should go into training the muscles. And so again, I like to just tell people, I like to see, unless you have a lot of time to give to this, but if you're like most people, I like to see if you have 5 hours, then that's it for your fitness. Let's spend 4 of those hours training your muscles, and let's spend 1 hour doing cardio. And it's a different discussion, but I do think it's smart to include some cardiovascular exercise, some sort of endurance exercise in a routine if we really are trying to optimize health and body composition and wellness. If, though, that doesn't work, let's say somebody only has 3 hours per week and they want to get going and they really want to see a change in their physique and their body composition, then I probably would start without any cardio. Say, all right, let's do 3 1-hour strength training workouts per week. Let's get a good meal plan in place. Let's get going, and you can do great with that. You can lose fat with that. You can get into great shape actually just doing that. If, though, they were to tell me, okay, I have another hour per week I can give to, even if it's like I can go outside. I have calls I do every day, and I take those calls outside, and I could kind of power walk around. It'd be a little bit awkward,
Mm-hmm.
but I could do that.
I do
It's
that every
hard.
day.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, it works, and but that's an effect that I would count that as cardio. It doesn't have to be, oh, I need to get into the spin room
Mm-hmm.
and destroy myself for 45 minutes. No, not at all. So then, coming back to this original point of women in particular, it's usually the other way around, where they're spending a lot of time on cardio, very little time on strength training, or no time on strength training. If they're doing some sort of resistance training, it's very light weights and it's not structured and it's not very effective. So switching that around is a real game changer for women. In the case of men, obviously guys are more inclined to lift weights than do cardio for the most part. And so the mistake that I'd say is most common among men is, I guess it's kind of similar actually. It's, yeah, they're in there, they're banging weights, but a lot of them are not putting much time into strength training, which really what that comes down to is getting strong on big, heavy lifts like the squat and the deadlift and the bench press and the overhead press, the exercises that they train a lot of muscle mass, they train many muscle groups, and they allow you to consistently add weight over time and safely. So you can start very weak on one of those exercises, and you can work at it for literally 3, 4, 5 years, making progress and end up very strong on those exercises. And if you can do that on those exercises that I just mentioned, you're going to transform your body and you are going to be very strong, period. Your whole body strength is going to be very high if you can get very strong on just those movements. And so that's what I recommend for women and for men. And then you can do other stuff. You can add quote unquote accessory exercises, kind of bodybuilding stuff on top of that, to pinpoint some of the muscle groups that tend to lag if all you were doing was the squat, bench, deadlift, and overhead press. And that's totally fine. And that is what I do. And that's what I recommend in my work. But the majority of your efforts should go into getting strong on those exercises if you want to transform your body composition as quickly and efficiently as possible. And so I'd say that's a big mistake. And doing too much cardio, and I know that seems like it's the same thing as what I just said, but to differentiate this is, even if somebody is doing what I just described, they're doing a lot of strength training and they're working at it, but they're also doing a lot of cardio that can get in the way of progress with the weightlifting in many different ways. And a good rule of thumb there that I share with people is try to keep your cardio to no more than about half of the amount of time you put into your muscle training, your strength training, your bodybuilding, if you want to use that term. So if somebody is lifting weights 4 hours per week, I would recommend that they do not do more than 2 hours a week of cardio. And that isn't to say that if you do more, you are going to halt your progress necessarily, but that is a good workable rule of thumb. And there are reasons why I recommend that. We don't have to get into all the specifics, but that is just, again, a common mistake, probably more common among women than men, but I think it's worth mentioning. And then another big one is not tracking like what they're doing in the gym, having no sort of training journal, whether it is pen and paper or just the notes app in their phone or a workout app or a spreadsheet like a Google sheet or whatever. But that can, unfortunately, just that alone can make a well-designed workout program that should be effective completely ineffective.
Mm-hmm.
And by just coming into the gym and loading the bar based on how you feel, and then maybe adjusting things because that first set was actually too light or maybe it was too heavy. All right, so that first set was not really even what you were kind of supposed to be doing, and then now you're trying to play with the weights, and worse is not having any plan really whatsoever, just being like, all right, I'm going to do a chest workout, and then you go in and you go, okay, the bench presses are full. All right, I guess I'll start over here. I'll start with the chest press machine. Oh, a bench press is open now. Okay, I'll do my couple sets here and I'll go over there, and then doing that for maybe it is maybe there's a time constraint, so it's like 45 minutes. I'm just going to do like chest exercises for 45 minutes. Um, or maybe if it's a little bit more sophisticated, maybe it's a volume constraint. Like I'm going to do 10 muscle building, 10 hard working sets for my chest today. That's what I'm going to do. That is effective exercise in that it's good. You're in the gym, you're training your muscles, or let's say you're working your muscles, you're burning calories. That's better than not showing up at all and just sitting on the couch and eating Doritos or something. But it's not training. It's not, because training has the connotation of organization, of systemization, of working in an orderly manner toward a goal. And the exercise approach can work when you're brand new because your body is so hyper responsive to training. Just anything causes muscles to grow and get stronger. And what can happen though is people, they don't realize that those quote unquote newbie gains, that honeymoon phase, it lasts maybe 6 months on average for most people. And then after that, it gets a lot harder to continue making progress. All of a sudden, what got you there is not producing any results whatsoever. And so I've heard from many of these people over the years who were very confused as to why was it going so well in the beginning. Let's say with that approach where it's, I just kind of work a body part. And I mean, I've heard from people who they didn't even have really a daily structure of, okay, I'll do my chest or maybe my upper body on this day and and then the next day will be my back or maybe my lower body or whatever. It was really just whatever they felt like training is what they would do. And so that approach, sure, it will work to some degree for a period of time until it no longer works. And then they have no idea what to do from there, right? And so again, this point though of tracking what you're doing is very important, even when you do have a proper plan, because you need to know what you did the previous week, for example. Depending on how the program is set up, if it's set up in a way where you're working in a rep range and your goal is to hit the top of the rep range for 1, 2, or 3 sets before you add weight to the bar, that's called double progression. And that's something that it's very workable. And I use it myself for certain exercises still. And that means, though, that you need to know what you did the previous week. And you also might want to know what you did the several weeks even prior to that if you're looking at how are things going. Like, okay, so you have 135 on the bar for your squat, and you got four, or let's say you got 6 reps a few weeks ago. Six, that was your best set, was 6 reps, and you're working the rep range of 6 to 8. So let's say it was like 5, 6, 6, and then 6, 6, 6, and then 6, 6, 6, and then 7, 6, 6. Like, you'll see that if you're tracking your training, and okay, I'm working my way there, and my progression goal is 1 set or 2 sets of 8, or however the program is set up. And when you do that exercise, when you step up to the bar with 135, it helps also just psychologically to know, this is what I got last week. I got 7 on this first set. You're focused now on 8. Like, can I get 8? That's the question. And you're really going to try for that 8, making sure that you maintain good form and don't just, push yourself to like absolute muscle failure, which would obviously be a mistake. But that helps, as opposed to just kind of putting weight on the bar and just going, I don't know, I'll just see how I do. Right. And it really makes a difference in terms of, I've experienced it in terms of what you end up doing. Like, I would argue, I don't know of any research on this. It may be out there, I just don't know of it, but I would be surprised if it weren't the case that when people come into a workout, again, with very specific targets that they are working for in each set, I'd be very surprised if those people didn't do better than in the case of where they come into the workout, maybe with the same weights, but no real targets. Just, I'm going to do as much as I can. I'm going to put the weight in the bar and just do it as well as I can, basically. And so you have to track your training to be able to know how things are going, and to know, what am I going for right here in this set. And so if you don't, then inevitably what happens is you just get stuck in a rut. Period. It's just guaranteed. At some point, if you're not tracking your training, you will get stuck.
Yeah, for sure. Were all really great points. And just to come full circle to what you mentioned in the beginning when we were talking about nutrition, and the first mistake in terms of tracking accurately and measuring things, it's the same kind of concept with training. Like, if you're not tracking, if you're not aware of what you're consuming and what you're doing in the gym, like, how are you going to make progress? Like, I don't even remember how much I lifted yesterday, but I know because I have it in my spreadsheet. And it's the same with everything else too, and other things as well that go into, overall, building the body composition that you want, aside from nutrition and training, like sleep and biofeedback metrics, and understanding that these all play a role. So I think the biggest thing is, like what you said, just awareness, and like having this data is very, very important, because then you're just kind of like, what's the saying, like throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping that it sticks or whatever.
Right.
That's basically what you're doing. So love it. Awesome. All right. Well, I did have a few other questions, but maybe we'll have to do like a part 2 sometime else. But this was a lot of great information. And just to kind of end, I always ask this question, putting you on the spot a little bit, but is there anything that you've personally changed your mind about in the past year, and why? And it can be nutrition, training, anything in your life.
In the last year, it's funny. Actually, I recently addressed this on my podcast in a Q&A, but it was more like, over the last several years, what training or diet positions of mine have changed. But let's see, in the last year, I would say, I mean, it's not too exciting, because it's related to a book that I published called Beyond Bigger, Leaner, Stronger, which is for intermediate to advanced weightlifters. Obviously, it has a male bias. There's a lot that women can get from that book, and I do plan on doing a female version of it. A lot of the fundamentals will be the same, but the training program itself will be a bit different. And there are a lot of things that I can make more specific to women if I'm speaking to women. In the case of Beyond Bigger, Leaner, Stronger, I knew I was speaking more specifically to men. And so there are some changes to the programming, because that was actually a second edition of the book. So there was a first edition I published years ago, and I don't want to get into like a long rambling discussion of training periodization, but particularly there was a time when I thought that there was a periodization, just to quickly explain, is in the case of what I'm talking about with weightlifting, it's really just changing rep ranges, just to get to the practical application of it, working with different loads for different amounts of reps, as opposed to just working in maybe one specific rep range for the big exercises and another rep range for the smaller exercises, which is a great approach that works well for a bit, until it just doesn't work so well anymore when you become more intermediate and advanced. And so there are different ways. Then, of course, if you're going to work in different rep ranges, there are many ways of doing that. And what I was I once was just thought that there was a method called conjugate periodization that I thought was probably the most effective way of going about it, and changed my mind on that, which is my current position is reflected in this new book, Beyond Brilliant Stronger. And the program has changed quite a bit to where the rep ranges, it uses what's called weekly undulating periodization. So for 1 week of training, for example, with the big lifts, you might be doing sets of 10 with, let's say, 75% on the bar. And then the next week, you're doing sets of 8 with 80% on the bar. And then the next week you're doing, I believe that's it might be 70% for 10. I don't remember the specifics on it, but just to give an example. So you're doing sets of 10, and then the following week, the weights are getting a little bit heavier, sets of 8. Following week, they're getting a little bit heavier, sets of 6. And I explain in the book why I now prefer that approach over what I was doing previously, which basically was you were working in different rep ranges in each workout. So you would start, let's say, with some heavy 2 warm up, and then do some heavy 2 rep, 1 or 2 sets of 2 reps, heavy 95%, let's say, on the bar for your squat, followed by 1 or 2 sets of, let's say, 4 or 6, followed by 1 or 2 sets of 8. And you can make that work. That's not a bad way of training, not at all. But I do prefer the newer weekly undulating method for reasons related to research. I think it's probably a bit more effective, and I think it's more enjoyable. And that is a big component of effective training, which maybe even, I don't know if my position has changed on this over the last year, but it has become more apparent to me how important it is to enjoy your training and how that translates into better results. And it's not surprising. It's not like a mind blown thing, but for whatever reason, just for me personally, I've seen it in my own training and seen it with a lot of people, where you can have the most scientifically optimal workout program, but if you don't enjoy it for whatever reason, and it might just be that you don't like some of the exercises that you're doing, maybe you don't quite feel them in the target muscle groups, or the workouts might be a bit too difficult, and that, of course, then just there's a point where you get 2/3 through your workout and you are getting exhausted and you're really not having a good time anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be, again, the rep ranges that you're working in. For example, if you're doing a lot of high rep work, especially as you start to get stronger, that's not fun. It's just not. It sucks. It hurts. Go do a set. If you've been lifting weights for a bit, go do a set of 20 reps of barbell squats that are, let's say, within 1 to 2 reps of muscle failure, like a true hard set. And ask yourself if you ever want to do that again.
Yeah,
I mean, the answer is no. I mean, for me, that limit is probably about 10 reps. Like true sets of 10 on the squat or deadlift are grueling. I mean, I do them, but would I want to do that? If that was my training program, if I had a coach and said, this is what you're doing now, you're doing sets of 10 for 2 months straight, I might do it if I thought there was a really good reason for me to do it, but I would not enjoy it. And the fact that I would not look forward to my workouts, for example, I really wouldn't if that's what I was doing. Sets of 10. So like, okay, let's say you're going to start with 4 sets of 10 on the squat, and then you're going to do 4 sets of 10 on the leg press, and then you're going to do 4 sets of 10 on the hamstring curl, for example. The hamstring curl, fine, whatever. But the most of that workout is gonna suck, and I'm just gonna grind through it, and I'm gonna be looking forward to being done with it. Really, that's gonna be the experience. Now, that can produce very different results than a setup that I enjoy, that I actually can look forward to. It doesn't mean that you're going to, enjoy every workout. Fine, we know that. But if the experience is a bit more fun and a bit more pleasant, maybe, even though working out is never exactly pleasant, but anybody who enjoys it knows what I'm talking about, right? Where like you're having a good time most of the time, then that can turn into better performance in non-obvious ways. Like you're going to be more focused on your training as opposed to maybe mind wandering elsewhere. You are going to probably give a bit more effort to it because you are enjoying it, because that's just the way we work, right? I mean, that's how it works we've all experienced that in our work. For example, if you're working on something, especially that requires some creative energy and some input, if you are just bored, or worse, you just really don't like it, like you feel hostile toward this work, it's never as good as the stuff that you are at least mildly interested in, let alone enthusiastic about. So that also is the case in training. So yeah, I think that's maybe even a better answer than the first one. That is more practical, more useful.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it's so true. Like adherence and enjoyment of what you're doing is probably the number one thing, no matter how like amazing the program is. If you can't follow it for an extended period of time, not just 1 or 2 weeks, but like a good amount of time, and you're actually enjoying what you're doing and looking forward to it, that's in my eyes, just like you said, probably the most important thing.
Totally.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Before we end, do you want to just tell our listeners kind of where they can find you, your website, social media, all that stuff?
Yeah. Legionathletics.com is really the hub where they can find, obviously that's Legion's website, but all over at the blog, there's probably 1,500 plus articles at this point on all types of things. So that Muscle for Life website that I mentioned earlier got just merged into Legion, because there was a point where it didn't really make sense that I had these two different properties and I was writing articles on both of them, and people were getting confused. Did they read the article on Muscle for Life, or was it Legion? And then Muscle for Life had a store that was selling Legion products, and then that was confusing. Did I order on Muscle for Life? So there's a point where it was like, all right, these really should just be the same thing. So Legion absorbed all of that content and all of the link juice and SEO stuff and whatever. So now there are a lot of articles over at Legion, and we post, I believe right now we're at 5 articles a week, and it's a combination of article updates. So we like to do that. And I say we because I have a team of people now that I work with, but we like to take a lot of our older content, and when it becomes appropriate, update it with new information, new research, and just try to keep the body of work as relevant and helpful and as possible. And of course, Google likes that as well. And then we regularly produce new stuff. So I write there, and I have a few people that write with me, and they write under their name, and my stuff's under my name. But I have a little team of people. And so there's that. You can find my podcast there. We also, you can find it anywhere you listen to a podcast, obviously, but it's called Muscle for Life, and you can check it out on the website. And we sell my books in the store, although you can get my books anywhere online where you buy books. And as far as social media, I'm not very active on social media. I'm most active on Instagram, but that's not saying much because I don't put that much time into it. But it's at Muscle for Life Fitness. And most of my time is actually spent just answering DMs, just answering questions. I don't do anything really in the way of like outreach and trying to comment on other people's stuff. And I just have too many other things to do. And I figure I'll just focus on people who are reaching out to me for help. I'll just focus on that. And I think that's the most valuable use of that time anyway. And then people can also email me if they have questions. That's a good way to get a hold of me. Instagram's DMs, it's buggy. Like sometimes I'll miss messages, or it'll show that I read when I didn't, and I do my best to stay on top of it. But email is much more reliable, and that's Mike at Muscle for Life, just muscleforlife.com.
Awesome. I will link all of those in the show notes so everybody can check those out. And I personally love your podcast. Listen to it all the time. So much great information. You have really great guests on. So highly recommend anybody listening to this podcast go over and listen to Mike's podcast. Awesome. Well, I learned a lot today, and I'm really excited that you came on, took the time to chat. I really appreciate it. And that's all we got. So I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks again.